Hey Michigan fans, Keith here from Lewis Jewelers, and we are super excited to be able to cheer on all the student athletes that will be on the field and the courts this season. But just like Michigan sports, special moments have not been canceled. Come into Lewis Jewelers or visit lewisjewelers.com so our team can help you celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or your just because moments. Go Blue!
Lewis Jewelers, celebrate the moments.
Welcome to the Wolverine.com podcast. This is the Maize in Blue breakdown. I am Clayton Sayfie with my esteemed colleague, Austin Fox from the Wolverine.com. Check us out. Check our content out at the Wolverine.com. It's been a crazy week, but you can use the promo code BLUE60 for 2 months of our premium content for free. So there's so much news going on right now surrounding the Jim Harbaugh potential contract extension, National Signing Day yesterday, which we'll get into. So tons of things behind the paywall that you're going to want to see. Tons of free stuff, too, that you can check out if you're not with us, but try us out for 60 days using promo code BLUE60. Austin Fox, how are we doing?
Great, man. Yesterday was obviously signing day, and even though it was super eventful and pretty impactful for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, it's kind of good to have it behind us at the same time because it was a long day. It was a lot of work, and at the same time, it's nice to reflect now today and kind of take a look back at the class as a whole and what all unfolded yesterday.
Definitely. I was out at two ceremonies, Andrell Anthony, wide receiver commit, and then Donovan Edwards to see him choose Michigan yesterday. It is pretty cool, like being there and you're with the families there. And, this year it was just a group of media, and that's about it. A couple friends here and there, but with everything going on, just a small group of people. And you just realize how happy everyone is, how proud they all are. Yesterday was all about the kids, especially for us at the Wolverine.com. I mean, that's what we were focused on, and being there in person too. It's just such a cool moment, and it shows you how cool it is. So yeah, like you said, looking back on it and be able to reflect today and just see what a special thing it is for these guys to move on. I was there. Andrell Anthony, his teammate Ethan Boyd is heading to Michigan State. Good luck to him. It is crazy. It's like you're moving on, and Andrell Anthony and Donovan Edwards and a bunch of other guys will be at Michigan in just a couple weeks as early enrollees. So crazy to think about. But I mean, what are your thoughts here heading into the holidays and Michigan football season over? You excited for Christmas here coming up?
Oh, yeah, man, that's an understatement. Christmas is a blast every single year, and you talked about how special of a day it was yesterday for these kids who signed, kind of like a pre-Christmas appetizer, I guess you could call it. And I've never known anyone personally or had any relatives who have signed a letter of intent to play D1 college ball, but at the same time, yesterday was kind of a special day for my cousin, actually, who is Andrell Anthony's personal trainer, and he was actually at the ceremony as well in Lansing, and he posted on Facebook yesterday. He said,
Why didn't I meet him?
I actually did not know he was going to be there until afterwards. So if I would have known, I would have absolutely given you guys the lowdown and had you guys meet, because he's been training Andrell Anthony since sixth grade, I believe. So he posted yesterday on Facebook a picture of him and Anthony, and he said one chapter ends and another begins. And of course, he's wearing MSU clothes and Andrell Anthony in his Michigan attire. So it is pretty cool when you've had an impact on some of these D1 recruits who have signed like my cousin has. So I'm sure it was a pretty special day for him. It was a special day for Andrell Anthony, who I got to know a little bit this past summer at a family get-together. So it's cool seeing these kids' dreams come true and finally put pen to paper and sign these D1 letters of intent.
He's a great kid. You can just tell. I've only met him twice, but it's like you couldn't be nicer. And the same with Donovan Edwards, who has a crazy story, and we can get into what actually happened yesterday on signing day with Michigan landing Rivals 100 running back Donovan Edwards out of West Bloomfield. Amazing story. Lost his mother very young in his life. Was raised by his dad, super close with his brother. Ron Bellamy, his head football coach at West Bloomfield, is a former Michigan wide receiver, has played a huge impact in everything that he has done. And to see it all culminate yesterday with him choosing his hometown team. And he said basically it was a tight race between Georgia and Notre Dame and Michigan. And then Alabama had a hat on the table as well. But at the end of the day, he just wanted to be closer to family, He likes the program at Michigan. He's kind of dreamed of playing at Michigan, and he loves the staff, and it just seemed to make too much sense. And that's kind of what, driving home from the ceremony yesterday, it did seem to make too much sense, where it was, even if he didn't know it, it was just always going to be Michigan for one way, for one reason or the other. And he seemed super at peace and super excited with his choice, and a huge land for Michigan. If you're looking at it from a Michigan perspective, with all the uncertainty, with a 2-4 season, the fact that you're able to actually get your top target that came down to the wire, that was considering schools that are having really good seasons. Notre Dame, Georgia's having a pretty good season, but Notre Dame could be in the college football playoff, and he chose Michigan. So pretty much a coup for Michigan, landing Edwards.
It was a really huge pickup for Jim Harbaugh and this Michigan coaching staff, and you got to give credit to Jay Harbaugh as well, Jim Harbaugh's son and Michigan's running backs coach. Donovan Edwards is now the third highest rated recruit in this 2021 Michigan class, behind J.J. McCarthy, the 4-star quarterback, and Xavier Worthy, the 4-star receiver out of California. You talked about how clutch it was for this Michigan coaching staff to land Edwards after the 2-4 season that they had and the struggles that they had on the field. Donovan Edwards told Big Ten Network last night in an interview that he had known the past few weeks that it was going to be Michigan, even though he kind of denied it in some of the interviews he gave yesterday. But again, props to this Michigan coaching staff, because they did have to fend off one of the biggest cheaters in Kirby Smart in Georgia and one of the biggest sleazebags in Kirby Smart to land Edwards. So that was all around impressive. You hate to lose out on elite in-state prospects like Donovan Edwards is right in your backyard. He talked about the proximity to Ann Arbor and how close he is. It's maybe a 30-40 minute drive from Ann Arbor. That's all. You were
40
there.
minutes from he said 40 minutes from the crib.
There you go. I love the terminology as well, calling the big house the crib. So that's absolutely what it is. You were there. It looked like a pretty cool event, man. You guys were out in the snow, out in the cold. What was it, in the upper 20s yesterday? You could see everybody's breath. So he was wearing that icy white jacket, rocking the earrings. So you called it a coup, and it absolutely was. We've seen some big Michigan surprises on signing day over the years. I don't want to call this a surprise, but at the same time, it was really good to see them close the deal on this one and pull in another elite prospect right in their backyard.
It was so damn cold. It was so cold, but it was worth it. And what a weird year. It was freezing at both of those ceremonies yesterday because nobody can do anything inside.
I was going to say, you spent the entire afternoon outside, whether it was Andrell Anthony out in Lansing or Donovan Edwards in West Bloomfield. There were snow flurries all afternoon as well where I was. So I don't know if temperatures got out of the 20s, but at the same time, I'm sure the cold was well worth it for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. The roads were tough on the way from Lansing to Detroit, and then they weren't as bad later on in the day. But it was started to feel like winter. It was kind of that first feeling of winter here heading in, and because it kind of went quick from football season right now to basically Christmas, and the season being extended so far out, so kind of weird. But yeah, all in all, a good day and a good day for Michigan. Obviously, we have to talk about Xavier Worthy sticking with the Wolverines. We had some indications, a few days before, and he ends up doing just that, sticking with Michigan over Alabama, which didn't look like a possibility, to be honest, 2 weeks ago. Because if you go down and watch Alabama in the Iron Bowl and blow out Auburn, and you see the guy who Josh Gaddis has been comparing you to, and Devontae Smith, go off and have a great season and be a Heisman contender, and they come on late. It's just like you don't expect a kid to stick with Michigan. You don't expect him to stick with a team that's 2-4. But the relationships won out in this case. They did with Donovan Edwards too, and that's another big one.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I think this is the commit that Michigan fans really, really wanted to hold on to in regards to ones who were on the fence. J.J. McCarthy was never on the fence, so he doesn't quite fit the bill. But as of a week or two ago, I thought that it was going to be Alabama for Xavier Worthy. You had planned a roundtable article and asking us guys at the Wolverine and some other experts where we thought he was going to land. And I was straight up when I told you that I think it's going to be Alabama. And that was my response. But then over the past few days, we had heard from a few insiders that, you know what, Michigan's going to hold on to this kid. And then those hints and those tips kept rolling in the days and the hours leading up to Worthy's announcement. Adam Gorney, one of Rivals.com's national guys, came on our board just before Worthy announced, and he said that he was just told it is not going to be Alabama for Worthy. And then we hop on the Instagram Live where Worthy was announcing, and he's like, bro, you know what? I'm not announcing here live on Instagram Live. And then he cut off the video, so nobody could actually watch where this kid announced. I think everybody was refreshing their Twitter pages like crazy, and sure enough, Michigan won out in the end. And this kid is borderline elite as well. He's not a 5-star, but he's rated 65th overall nationally, so he's not far from 5-star status. He's the second highest rated commit in this entire class, and he's literally one of the biggest risers in terms of any player in the entire country. He went from a 3-star to a top 70 kid nationally, so that just goes to show you how high these recruiting experts are on him. So again, props to Josh Gaddis and this Michigan coaching staff for not only getting him to commit in the first place when they did a few months ago, but also holding on to his commitment when Alabama and Nick Saban came rushing in there in the last at the last minute over the last few months.
Yeah, go check out EJ's podcast recapping the entire day, but I figured we had to hit on both of those guys because they're huge lands. They're both early enrollees. And, EJ covers them as the recruits, and in a couple weeks, they'll be Michigan football players, and they will be our responsibility to cover. So I can't wait to cover both those guys. Pretty explosive. And then if you add in J.J. McCarthy. So quarterback, J.J., Donovan Edwards at running back, Xavier Worthy at receiver. You got some good offensive linemen. But in terms of the skill position, offensive guys, I mean, you can't really ask for much more.
No, you look at the offensive players in Michigan's class, and it's absolutely outstanding. They're set at pretty much every offensive position, whether it's McCarthy at quarterback, Edwards at running back, Xavier Worthy, and Christian Dixon at receiver, Dixon being another 4-star top 250 guy. And then you have one of the best tight ends in the entire country in Lewis Hansen, yet another top 100 prospect and a 4-star, of course, out of Needham, Massachusetts. Then you look at the offensive line, and they're set there as well. Ed Warner, Michigan's offensive line coach, did an outstanding job in that regard with 4-star offensive tackle Tristan Bounds, a 6'8" prospect, Giovanni Alhadi, another 4-star offensive tackle, Raheem Anderson, one of the country's best centers. So I feel like I'm forgetting a guy or two along the offensive front, but that just goes to show you how good of a job they did recruiting the offensive side of the ball, which is obviously a spot they need to shore up a little bit after a lot of the offensive struggles they had on the field this past season.
Yeah, name a spot, and they basically have to shore it up. But a good day overall for Michigan. Let's move into some football talk quickly before we get to some basketball, and then we're gonna pick some college football games at the end for Champions Week / championship, conference championship weekend. But football, obviously, 2 days ago, the Iowa game is canceled. Michigan had over 50 guys out due to COVID. So, the third straight week that Michigan will not play. And, it's just the perfect way to end 2020. Three straight games get canceled. A 2-4 season before that. What a year. And it's just incredible where we're at. And basically now we're looking at all eyes being on Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh, especially after signing day. What they're going to do with the contract extension. Is he going to go into the last year of the deal without an extension signed? Is he going to sign one? Is he going to move on? All eyes are on that. And then all eyes would be on if he is retained and, if Jim Harbaugh does come back, what assistant coach changes he's going to make. So basically we have accelerated into the offseason, which would normally already be the case. But since Michigan had a game against Iowa scheduled, it was not going to be the case until Tuesday when they were canceled, unfortunately, due to a COVID outbreak that they really haven't been able to get under control. So here we are. It is Michigan football offseason, barring a very big surprise that they would accept a bowl invite.
Yeah, and we have some breaking news here at 2:15 Eastern Time. The Michigan State-Maryland game, the game of the week this Saturday, has been canceled. So anybody who was planning on watching it, which I doubt there were many, that's just another Big Ten game that has been canceled this weekend.
Who canceled it?
Maryland canceled.
Okay.
Looked like it just happened. So, yep, that's another game we can cross off the list. I'm not surprised the Michigan-Iowa game was canceled, though. On Monday and Sunday, I fully expected that game to get played, or at least once the matchups were announced, because Michigan did return to practice last Sunday, and they practiced on Monday. And we actually had a player press conference with Josh Ross and Andrew Stuber on Tuesday afternoon at 12 o'clock. And the game was still a go at that point, at least from what we had heard. And Ross and Stuber both talked about how excited they were to play that Michigan-Iowa game on Saturday. And it was literally, an hour and a half later when the school announced that the game had been canceled. So I know that you were all for more football, and I respect the heck out of that. But a part of me was very, very glad to see this game get canceled because it was a massive mismatch, and I don't see how Michigan would have competed in this game. As much as it pains me to say that, I think it would have been a blowout. Iowa is playing outstanding lately. They're 6-2 after their 0-2 start, and I believe 5 of those 6 victories have come by 14 points or more. So they're playing like one of the best teams in the conference. All the focus now does turn to that Jim Harbaugh contract and Ward Manuel, the athletic director, and whether or not they can get that thing cleared up ASAP. We obviously have Christmas right around the corner. I expect this announcement to come any day. Most people think it should have been cleared up already, but it really didn't affect the Michigan signees that much on signing day. So that's one positive out of this whole thing. But yeah, that needs to be the sole focus of Ward Manuel now and getting that thing cleared up. And I hope we have a resolution on this before the new year.
It is pretty incredible that it didn't affect signing day more. You had Brandon Jennings flip, the linebacker from Jacksonville, and uncertainty was the reason there. Uncertainty with the coaching staff. He went to Maryland, though. I mean, I guess it is what it is. And then you had Quentin Somerville, which may have been a mutual type of thing the night before signing day with all the buzz coming in. And then he signs with UCLA, staying out west yesterday morning. But the fact that they were able to sign this class is very good. Does Jim Harbaugh now have more leverage after signing day than he did before? Because I would argue that just the fact that he's shown the ability to get this talent, and he has J.J. McCarthy coming in and everything else, his top-rated quarterback that he's ever landed at Michigan, you kind of want to see what he can do with it. Maybe if you're Ward Manuel, a little bit more after signing day. I know that, JJ's been in the fold for quite some time, and, I'm sure Ward and stuff kind of knew that Donovan Edwards was going to come at least a day or two ahead of time, like we did, and Xavier Worthy was going to stick with Michigan. But, this was posed on our message board yesterday, and I thought it was interesting. Does this kind of change the outlook for Jim Harbaugh? Well, what about in your mind?
I totally get where you're coming from and where the other people who bring this up are coming from, but I disagree quite a bit. I don't think this signing class has anything to do with Ward Manuel's decision and Jim Harbaugh's decision, and nor do I think it should. I think it should have zero impact, actually, on what Ward Manuel decides. Jim Harbaugh has signed outstanding recruiting classes almost every year he's been here. So this top 12 class is nothing new. He signed back-to-back number 4 classes in 2016 and 2017, and every single full class he signed has been top 11 in the country, with the exception of that 2018 class. So again, this is nothing new, and I don't think that this really, really good signing class should have any impact whatsoever on Ward Manuel's decision.
Yeah, it probably won't. But it's interesting because Jim Harbaugh's telling every recruit that he's committed to being here and everything like that. He seems to kind of be sending that message, and he was clear on Monday at his press conference that he said, like, I tell them I'm committed to Michigan. I'm committed to being here. He doesn't say things like that without sending the exact message he wants to send and wording it the exact way he wants to word it. I think he basically was sending the message to not only Ward Manuel, but the Michigan community. And certainly knowing that Ward is listening, that he wants to be here. He may have less leverage than he did, a year or two ago, or, back in January when they were discussing the extension, but he's committed to being there. And I think it might be, a message sent that I want to be here. What can you do for me?
Yeah, that makes sense as well. I spoke with several recruits about 5 days ago, so this might be a little outdated because a lot has changed within the past 5 days, but some of the recruits in the class weren't quite getting that message. 4-star DN Keyshawn Bennett said that he had not been relayed that message from Harbaugh, and Lewis Hanson, the 4-star tight end, said that they hadn't really talked about it yet. Tristan Bounds said the exact same thing, and then yet another commit, or now signee, 3-star linebacker Tyler McLaurin, had the opposite message. He said Harbaugh had 100% told him he plans on staying. So there's no question that the message had been mixed with the recruiting class leading up to signing day. And now we'll see what Harbaugh tells these guys from here on out. I'm not surprised one bit that he told a lot of guys that he wants to be here and that he wants to be Michigan's coach moving forward. But at the same time, this is not a shot at Jim Harbaugh whatsoever, but I guess what else is he going to say? He's not going to tell those guys that, hey, I might leave here in a few weeks, but we still want you to sign this letter. So I'm not surprised that he was telling these guys that he wants to be here, even though he may not have known and may not still know 100% if that's what's going to be the case here moving forward.
Yeah, and some of the kids might not even have asked him about it. I mean, it's something that we're fixated on and we're focused on, but if you've been recruited by him for years and you decided to choose Michigan, you don't necessarily bring it up. I mean, we know for a fact that when Jim Harbaugh was doing his virtual in-home visit with Louis Hansen, that the Hansens just didn't bring it up because they said either way, I'm signing and Louis is going to come to Michigan. And I think a lot of guys feel like that. I talked to Andrell Anthony, as I mentioned yesterday, and he said that, Jim Harbaugh said he's going to be back. He said that to the class, and he believes him. He believes he's going to be coached by Jim Harbaugh. But Andrell Anthony said even if something happened and something crazy happened and he's not there, he still loves Michigan and he still wants to be there. So it might not come up, I think, as much as some people think it might in these conversations with the recruits because, they just have the relationship and they talk about different things and they talk about football and they just kind of assume that he's going to be back. And he's telling the other ones that want a straight up answer that he is. So it seems like he wants to be here. And we will see what happens. Any prediction for a timeline or for what happens? Because I'm with you that I think it's going to happen probably in the next 10 days as a guess. And I would guess that there is an extension signed and Jim Harbaugh remains the head coach at Michigan. But again, right now, the fact that it hasn't been done tells us that really nobody knows anything for sure.
Yeah, I'm done trying to give predictions on the timeline for this because nobody knows, and people have been throwing out predictions on when this thing might get done, and they've been wrong all along so far. So I'm not even going to give a prediction because I simply don't know, nor does anybody else, and I think that may even include Harbaugh and Manuel. So I'll say before January 10th, this thing gets done. I know that's not saying much of anything. I've also gone back and forth on whether or not Harbaugh will be here next year, and I'm still going back and forth. But as of now, as of today, December 16th or whatever today's date is, 17th, I think, I'm going to say that Harbaugh sticks around and will be here next year. But hey, you know what? You could ask me the same question in 2 or 3 days, and I could give a different answer. That just shows you how much fluctuation has gone on throughout this whole thing and how much uncertainty there is. But as of now, I'm going to say that Harbaugh remains Michigan's head coach.
Crazy times. It is crazy times. We'll see what happens. You mentioned earlier, it could be any day. It could be January 9th. You could be if January 10th is your guess, which you said by January 10th. So obviously it's not your guess of the day, but
right.
It could be somewhere around there. Who knows if they want to wait? And let's say Harbaugh is weighing some NFL options and those jobs start to come open right at the end of December and then into early January. Who knows if it gets taken to that? And I think if it goes beyond, the new year, certainly probably after the 10-day window that I gave, if it goes beyond that, I think by the hour, the chances of him returning go down. When those jobs come up and the calls start coming, and who's to say they haven't already from some NFL teams, then I think any option is going to be on the table. And the farther away you move from signing day when you were telling kids you're going to be there, and, even if he was fully intentionally, intending on being there, every day you move past signing day, the less that's on your mind maybe, and you start weighing some more options. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens. One of the more unique situations in college football right now off the field. If you take everything that's gone on off the field at Michigan with this contract situation, it is one of the bigger storylines that you hear about each and every day, and we're living through it here day to day, covering it here at thewolverine.com. Austin, let's get into basketball. We had the game Sunday against Penn State, a good win for Michigan to start out the Big Ten slate, and now a huge break. Wolverines do not play until Christmas Day at Nebraska, Christmas in Lincoln. You going?
I will. I will be at Pinnacle Bank Arena. I'll probably be literally the only media person in attendance. It'll be the coaches, the staff, and the players, and me sitting in the stand. So I'm looking forward to spending my Christmas Day that way.
Obviously, he's kidding, folks, I think.
Yeah, I'm 100% kidding. Though I think I had you there for a second at the end.
I know. Like, I knew for a fact you weren't going, but it was pretty convincing. But, I mean, we'll be working it. We'll be doing it from home. And, yeah, I don't think, not to reveal any secrets, but I don't think many of the Michigan, even PR staff, is going to be out there, if any. So it is going to be, I guess everyone's kind of felt like and realized this year you can work from home more than you thought you could before.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously nothing wrong with us going to these games, but in a lot of ways we really don't need to be there because we don't get anything at these games that we wouldn't get from sitting at home watching it on TV on our couch with a beer in our hand. I mean, the post-game press conferences are done via Zoom now, so we're not even in the media rooms or the press conference rooms at Chrysler. After these games, we do them from our computers, which, again, you can do from your computer with the exact same thing at home. So it's been changed a lot because beforehand, in a normal year, when we'd go to a basketball game, we'd get there plenty early, you sit in the media section, you're in the press conference room for a long time after talking to the head coach and the players and the opponent's head coach as he would come in, but that's obviously not the case anymore. And like you said, some key members of Michigan's own PR department aren't even going to be at Nebraska, and I don't think it'll make much of a difference in regards to how this game is handled from a media standpoint. So, yeah, but again, the post games are all done via Zoom, so that's how we get our info, and I think that's how it will be done here for the rest of the season. I don't think fans will be let in at any point, even once February and March roll around.
That's a little behind the biz. I didn't know we were allowed to drink beer during these games.
Did I say that out loud? As long as it's Busch Light.
True. Official sponsor. Unofficial, though.
Exactly.
In case I would get sued for saying that. Let's talk about the team very quickly. Starting out the Big Ten season that way, I think, was big. My takeaway from that game is that Hunter Dickinson is ridiculous. Covering that. Like, I was sitting there, and at Chrysler, every basket he made, I think, I was just shook my head, and I was like, I mean, this kid is not a freshman. He's not. And even this was like the most just fitting thing ever was his dunk attempt. He dunks it. It doesn't go in. The ball kind of like flies up in the air, and then, he lets go of the rim. The rim's kind of shaking, and it just goes in anyway because Hunter Dickinson has ridiculous touch. For one, he has great moves. He's under control. He's a great passer. He runs well in transition. And I think obviously that will improve as his career goes on. But other than a jump shot, there's nothing that this kid, and he can shoot. He just hasn't really made any of his, I think he's taken 3 on the year. But there's really nothing he hasn't been able to do. He's been way better than advertised. I know we talked about him at length last week, just because of how good he was doing through 5 games. But the number one thing from that game is, again, he's the player of the game. I think, I do player of the game in my takeaways after each basketball game. I think he's gotten it 4 out of 6 games now.
So I don't want to get ahead of myself or anything, but I'm going to ask you a question right now. Is Hunter Dickinson the best overall player on this entire team? Is he better than Livers and Wagner and Brown at this point?
He has been.
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't seen. I mean, Franz Wagner seems to be in a funk a little bit. He's better than how he's played so far. Isaiah Livers is an elite shooter who seems to have perfected a few more moves. I like his pull up, and he's a very good defender for his position. But I would say Hunter Dickinson, man, it's so tough they're all so important. But I would say he's as important right now to this team as an Isaiah Livers, and I would say he's more important right now than Franz Wagner. That could change when Franz starts to come on a little bit. But can we talk about how much of you get to your point, and then let's talk about Franz Wagner.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, put you on the spotlight like that.
No.
But It's an interesting question, and I think you nailed it. He has probably been the best player on this team so far this year. Whether or not he is at season's end obviously remains to be seen, but so far, I think he has been the best player, and I think he is the most valuable player on the team right now when considering Austin Davis is out with injury. So they 100% cannot afford to lose Dickinson. You look at his numbers, and he's posting insane numbers for a freshman. He's averaging 15.7 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, and is shooting 69% from the field. He is, in my opinion, far and away the best freshman in the entire Big Ten. I took a look at all the Big Ten's freshman stats a few days ago, and again, he's far and away the best. Zach Edey from Purdue, the 7'4" center, was the second best in my opinion, and Adam Miller, the outstanding guard from Illinois, is third best. But Dickinson has been better than these guys. It's amazing the touch he shows around the rim. Almost every shot he takes, it seems like goes in. So this guy looks like a seasoned vet, and I think training with Ucla Garza this past offseason is a big reason for that. We heard reports from Dickinson's dad that he actually beat Ucla Garza in some of these one-on-one matchups, and Garza is arguably the best player in all of college basketball. So Hunter Dickinson is exceeding everyone's expectations so far, with perhaps his own being an exception. But I've just been blown away with him, and I've been very impressed overall with this Michigan team as a whole so far. They're exceeding my expectations. That Penn State win last Sunday was just a gritty, grinded-out win over what is, I think, a very solid Penn State team. That is not a lower echelon Big Ten team, in my opinion. So I love where this Michigan team is headed. I can't wait for the Christmas Day game against Nebraska and then New Year's Eve against Maryland. You have two tune-ups, if you will, against lesser Big Ten teams before the grind really, really kicks in once the calendar flips to 2021. And I think this Michigan team could finish as one of the best teams in the entire conference and challenge for the Big Ten title.
It's just so hard to say because I've been impressed as well, but it's 6 games. They've played one power conference opponent, Penn State. So it could be a little bit of fool's gold. And, but at the same time, guys playing well, specifically, like individually, I think is easier to judge. And I agree with you that I think this can be a Big Ten contender. I think it also could be a team that finishes 7th or 8th in the conference and is a borderline, bubble team that makes it in. I would say that's the floor right now. As you look at it now, that could change with injuries. We've already seen one with Austin Davis that doesn't do a whole lot other than for depth down low. But yeah, let's talk about Franz, as we kind of alluded to. What's going on with him? Because you watch him out there, he is bigger and stronger from last year, but that's not always like the best thing for a basketball player. And there's been people mentioning, he looks a little stiff. He looks a little stiffer than last year. I tend to agree with that a little bit. Maybe he just needs to get used to, some of the added weight, some of the added strength that he has. But he seems hesitant, on top of maybe what he looks like physically. I think the biggest problem with him right now is that he does look a little hesitant. He'll have an open jump shot, an open three, hesitates before shooting it, or just doesn't shoot it at all. When he drives in, he's not as under control as he could be and as we've seen him be. So, maybe it's just a little bit of a sophomore slump in the first 6 games. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he kind of takes off the rest of the year. We know for a fact he was dominating in preseason practice. That is from sources that know it as well as anybody. I'll just tell you that. So, the people, and I say that because there's been people like, oh, of course the Franz hype was just hype. Well, this is coming from, people that were at every practice and saw exactly what was going on. And the scrimmage right before the season, Franz Wagner, I think he put up like 25 points and, was pretty dominant. I will say this about Franz, though: when the shot doesn't fall, when his offense isn't going, he still rebounds like crazy and he plays great defense as well as he can. And that is the, true mark of a really good basketball player that, that can do that and not let the shooting or the lack of offense affect the rest of his game.
You said it, my man. It's been 6 games. That's a very, very small sample size, so I'm not worried about Franz Wagner one bit. You look at his numbers, and they're actually not that bad. He's averaging 9.5 points a game, which is well under expectations, but at the same time, it's not terrible. And you talked about the rebounding, how he hasn't let that his offensive struggles affect his rebounding. He's averaging 7 per game, which is the second most on the team behind Dickinson. So, yes, he's been a little disappointing so far, but again, I'm not concerned about it one bit. He has scored 14 points in 2 different games this year, and he's shooting 50% from the field. So one of the few complaints I have with him is that his three-point shot is not falling. He's only hit 1 3 on the entire year, so I think he'll take off soon as well. I'm really not worried about it at all. It is a long season every year, the college basketball season that is. It's a marathon, so you are bound to go through some slumps and get in some funks, and I think he's just in his right now. Does he look a little more stiff than last year? Perhaps, but again, I don't think that's much of a concern at all, and when it's all said and done, I think his stats are going to be just fine on the year, and he's still going to be one of the most valuable players on this Michigan team.
Before we move on, I'm looking at the schedule. At Nebraska on Christmas, we talked about the at Maryland game on New Year's Eve, against Northwestern at home on January 3rd, against Minnesota at home on the 6th, at Penn State on the 9th, and then it gets tougher with Wisconsin on January 12th. Then you go at Minnesota versus Maryland. Those aren't going to be hard. It's a good, month that, over a month that you have right now without too many challenging games. When is Michigan going to lose their first game? Can we get a prediction on that? Because I go up and down the schedule. Maybe you don't have it pulled up, but I would argue there's a pretty darn good chance they go into probably the January 12th game against Wisconsin undefeated. I would say that they'll have a good shot to beat Penn State at Penn State, and they could easily drop that game. But I'm going to say Michigan's undefeated heading into a January 12th matchup at home against Wisconsin, which, hey, I'm not saying they're going to lose that game, but I'd say that would be, kind of one of those 50-50 games. I assume Wisconsin gets things going a little bit more than they have been. But this has the makings of a really, really good start for Michigan. The schedule's not hard. It gets harder at the end, but to grab some momentum and figure out who you are as a team early on, I like the schedule and how it lines up for Michigan.
So what you're saying is they'll match the school record 17-0 start that they got off to in 2018, 2019? Is that what I'm hearing?
Would that be – no, I'm not saying that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with
you. They could. If you look at Austin, so the January 12th game against Wisconsin, and then they go at Minnesota versus Maryland, at Purdue, obviously going to be tough, versus Indiana, at Northwestern. That's all the way to February 3rd. I'm not saying they're going to do that, and I didn't count that up. I assume that'd be probably right around 17-ish. And obviously it's completely different because they played less non-conference games. But I'm not saying they're going to do that. They'll probably have 2-3 losses by then, at least one. But the schedule doesn't get super tough for any sort of big stretch before February 6th against Michigan State. Then it gets really tough. We talked about that last week. Michigan State, Illinois, at Wisconsin, Rutgers, at Ohio State, at Indiana, versus Iowa, and at Michigan State to end the year. Incredibly tough. But I think this Michigan team will contend going into that stretch if they have 1 or 2 losses heading in. And I think that's a very realistic possibility. I'm not going to rule out the 17-0 start, but I will say, if you want to bet on that, I will say Michigan does not start out 17-0.
Another fun fact, this is the 3rd straight year that Michigan has started 6-0. So I don't think that's something that many schools around the country can say. And it's not like the non-conference.
Duke, right? Wait, Duke's probably undefeated, right?
They are in Mike Krzyzewski in the NCAA book. So
yeah, because those games don't count. Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you that Michigan's schedule sets up very well throughout January, and the back half of their schedule is incredibly backloaded with Illinois, Wisconsin, MSU, Ohio State being the teams that they play down the stretch, Iowa on the second last game of the year. I think most people view MSU, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin as the top 4 teams in the conference right now. And prior to February, Michigan only plays one of those 4, and that's Wisconsin on January 12th. I think Michigan will be favored in every game leading up to that Wisconsin game, but man, I got to pick them to lose somewhere along the line prior to that Wisconsin game. I don't know which one it'll be. At Maryland on New Year's Eve, I don't think will be easy, even though I think Maryland is very bad and one of the worst teams in the conference. But still, anytime you go on the road, I know it's not the same this year, even close to the same, but I still hold my breath. Even Nebraska on Christmas Day, man, I'm not going to rule that out as a loss. That's no game.
Well, I'll say this about those two games. It wouldn't shock me at all if they lose one of those either, because to keep your focus in a year like this on the road on two holidays, especially the Christmas game. Isaiah Livers has already said to the media he's not looking forward to that, and he said we're not looking forward to it. So I assume he's talked about it with some of his teammates. And to keep your focus at Nebraska in Lincoln on Christmas Day night, you got to wait around all day on Christmas Day, and then at Maryland on New Year's Eve night. I know the bars aren't going to be hopping here in Michigan probably by New Year's Eve. I hope they are. But, you know, still, it's New Year's Eve. To keep your focus over the holidays in a trying year when you haven't been able to go home and see your families, they could lose one of those two games. At the same time, what's your – I'm going to nail you down on this. I think they lose to Wisconsin January 12th. If you had to pick a game, I'm doing the gun to your head thing. Which game are they going to lose first? How far are they going to go without dropping a game?
I'm going to say Maryland on New Year's Eve. I'm going to peg that as the first loss.
So what does one Michigan fan drink after that game on New Year's Eve after a tough loss?
Busch Light would be my usual answer, but I'm going to mix it up.
What about if they won? Busch Light?
Well, Busch Light regardless.
All right.
I'm going to mix it up and get a little fancy since it is New Year's Eve. So, you know what? Why don't we get a higher product and say, maybe a Natural Light or even a Budweiser or Heineken? We can get a little more fancy since it is New Year's Eve. So, but any alcoholic beverage I think would be appropriate here.
I was thinking maybe like some whiskey or something after a loss, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and we'll obviously we will preview Michigan's game against against Nebraska on Christmas Day on our podcast next week, heading into that Christmas Day matchup. But we were talking before the show, what a great sports Saturday it is going to be this upcoming Saturday. So we'll do our college football picks. But before that, insane college basketball games on Saturday, including Iowa Gonzaga. I am excited to have an overload of sports right in my face on Saturday.
It should be good, man. Just going through this college basketball slate on Saturday, and it's off the charts. It's as good as it gets. You mentioned Gonzaga, Iowa. That's got to be the game of the year in college basketball so far. Iowa is ranked number 3. Gonzaga is number 1. The game is played in Sioux Falls, a neutral location. I'm not sure if that's North Dakota or South Dakota, but I know it's one of the two. So pretty close to Iowa, closer to Iowa than Gonzaga anyway. We have an early tip at 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, Indiana and Butler. So that should be a fun one. Wisconsin, Louisville, kicking things off early. Kentucky, North Carolina at 2 o'clock. Kentucky's 1-4 right now. It's their worst start since 1984-85 when Joe Hall was the coach. So if they lose to Carolina, which they'll definitely be underdogs, that would drop their record to 1-5. And I would love to know the last time that they started 1-5 in a year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's pre-Adolph Rupp days, and he started coaching there in 1930. So we're going way back on that one. Ohio State, UCLA later in the day. That's also part of the Kentucky, North Carolina event, the CBS Sports Classic. Ohio State dropped their first game of the year last night to Purdue 67-60. So it would be great to see Ohio State drop 2 in a row. I'm looking forward to that one. Just scrolling through my Yahoo Sports app here, and there's tons of other great college basketball games on throughout the day. Notre Dame, Purdue at 2:30. Go Boilers, man. That one's a no-brainer. I know they carry over into the night as well, and I think there's some on Sunday as well. And that's with college football going on at the exact same time on Saturday. So unfortunately, Michigan will not be a part of the action. But man, the slate in college basketball is just about as good as it gets, and more than what you can ask for this entire weekend.
Sometimes when your team isn't playing and there's just incredible games going on throughout the day, it's actually fine. I would obviously much prefer that over like just a totally dead week when your team's on a bye or something like that. So it's still going to be enjoyable, and especially for us where it's like if Michigan were to play a football game, which by the way I'm fine with, and it's crazy we're able to do that. and cover the team, but you're watching the game for 3-4 hours, and then you're covering the game for several hours after that. You're working. So to be able to watch these games, it's going to be fun. And let's do our college football picks on that note, because it is championship weekend for every conference, and then a few Big Ten games. Unfortunately, about half of them have been canceled, though, heading in. But let's do the conference championship games, and then maybe we'll pick some other game. But we can start at noon with Oklahoma and Iowa State. Iowa State is 5.5-point underdogs in the Big 12 championship game. And, man, Oklahoma had a rough beginning to this season. They're number 10, Iowa State number 6. But Iowa State beat them earlier in the year. That's correct? Is that right?
Yeah, Iowa State won the first game between those two.
Man, I think with how hot Oklahoma has been and how they've kind of turned their season around, I'm going to go with them to win by a touchdown and cover this thing.
Couldn't agree with you more, man. Oklahoma has won 6 in a row. They started the year 1-2 with a bad loss to Kansas State, and then they lost to Iowa State as well, like we just mentioned. Iowa State's hot as well, but yeah, I got to go with Oklahoma in this one. It's hard to see Iowa State beating Oklahoma twice in the same year, so give me the Sooners to repeat as Big 12 champs for, I don't have the stats in front of me, but what feels like probably the 5th time in 6 years, or 6 out of 7 or something like that, ever since Texas has fallen off, basically.
True. Yeah, they've become the dominant program in the Big 12. Also at noon, so, if you're planning out your day, we already talked about the college basketball games that you're going to have to watch. You might want to get a couple laptops out, maybe your phone to stream. If you have a TV or 2 or 3, or buy one with use some sort of holiday deal, you might want to just load up on TVs this weekend for all these games. But Northwestern and Ohio State in Indy. Ohio State 20.5-point favorites over the Wildcats. I'm going with Ohio State, and I've pretty much done that all year with them. And they really haven't actually covered the spread as much as they did last year, which was ridiculous. I think they did it every game except one. But I think Northwestern, they had the fluke game against Michigan State, but at the same time, they're not talented enough to hang with Ohio State. They're not talented enough to not get blown out by Ohio State, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I actually think Iowa's the best team in the Big Ten West. They lost by 1 to Northwestern. If they didn't lose week 1 to Purdue, then they would be the team representing the West in the Big Ten Championship. So I think that Northwestern has had a great year. I've been rooting for them all year, but I think they're going to get killed by Ohio State.
Yeah, I really couldn't care less about this game. I have not much to say about it. It should be Indiana Northwestern if the flip-flopping Big Ten and their joke of a commissioner, Kevin Warren, wouldn't have ignored his own rules and, of course, showed an immense amount of favoritism to Ohio State like they always do. So give me Ohio State by a lot.
Yeah, I don't like the decision they made either. 4 o'clock, Clemson and Notre Dame, the rematch. Notre Dame getting 10.5 points as underdogs here against Clemson with Trevor Lawrence, with a healthy defense. I'm not confident either way on this. I would say I lean Clemson to win by more than 10.5, but it would not surprise me at all if Notre Dame keeps it close. So that's my kind of middleman answer there.
I fully expect Notre Dame to keep this one very close as well. They obviously won the first time around. You talked about the middleman, but how about the bagman? Man, that's what Clemson and Dabo Swinney know all about. One of the dirtiest programs in college football. It's amazing that they lost a game this year when considering how badly they cheat. So give me Clemson. I would not touch that 10.5 spread. I think they get it done by 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch that either. And then the SEC championship game, we'll pick this one and get out of here. Alabama and Florida. And Florida is 17-point underdogs after a despicable loss last week to LSU. And the way they did it with the thrown shoe to pick up the personal foul, keep the LSU drive alive before they kick the game-winning field goal. And then Florida missed a long field goal at the end to tie it or to win it.
I think LSU that won it, the long field goal. LSU.
Right, but then Florida had an attempt super long at the end.
To tie it and
to tie it. Yep. Okay. So like everyone's down on Florida this week and everyone's making fun of Dan Mullen and everything. I'm not telling anybody to put money on this at all, and I wouldn't either, and I'm not going to. But I just feel like Florida, with that offense and how dynamic it is, and I think they're getting Kyle Pitts back. I think we're forgetting that we expected, Florida to Florida wins this game if they didn't lose last week, and they're in the college football playoff. They're good enough, and people were thinking, okay, maybe they can do that if they beat Alabama. Alabama's the best team in the country. Alabama's going to win this game. I'm going to just say that I lean that Florida keeps it a little closer than people think, but you don't make money betting against Alabama.
Speaking of bagmen and money, man, we've got Dan Mullen, Moneybags Mullen down there for Florida going against Alabama. That's a fact. That's not something I made up. So I think Florida hangs around in this one. This one's not going to be a blowout. Again, I would not touch that 17-point spread, though. Alabama by 14 or 17. They're going to control the game, lead throughout, but Florida will hang around just enough to potentially threaten in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I've got Alabama again by I think the spread is spot on, 17.
Since I didn't prepare an over-under to send us out of the show here, the over-under on that game, 74.5. Where do you lean? I'm going to go over because that sounds so much fun to watch, and Florida's offense is dynamic. Alabama's offense is dynamic. Give me all the points.
Oh, wow, more math. I vowed a few weeks ago on here I would never do math again and embarrass myself the way I always do on this podcast. So I've got a final score of, let's see, 44 to, 28. What does that come out to? 54, 64, 70. Right around 70. What was it, 74?
Yeah, 74.5.
Okay, that was actually pretty good math on my end then.
So what does it come out to?
I don't know. I thought you were calculating it.
That'd be, you're looking at 72, I want to say. So you'll take the under.
So you're saying 72 is less than 74. Got it. Okay.
On that note, that's it for the Maize and Blue breakdown for this week. Sending you out with some math. You always learn something here on this show. But we'll talk to everybody next week heading into Christmas. But enjoy the, it feels like the holidays already. So enjoy that. And we'll talk to you next week heading into Michigan basketball's game at Nebraska and any other news that we pick up. Use the promo code BLUE60 at thewolverine.com, and we'll talk to you next week.